fantastic job. It was a number of people working together who had something, a formula that just hit. Like, Gail, it's like a hit song. Why is it, you could hear two great songs or two great singers, and one becomes, number one superstar, and the other one doesn't. And sometimes it's obvious, there's a spark. But other times it's just that one person was at the right place at the right time and had all the right elements lining up. And there you go. That's what happened McDonald's with Dick and Mac and Ray and Harry Sonneborn and all these other army of people all around the country, including Joan's first husband, who were working really, really hard to make their individual franchises work.
Well, you bring up a really, really good point, and that is, and something that people listening need to understand, that you need a great team around you if you're going to accomplish something like this. And you've got to have people who believe in you as much as you believe in you, and sometimes
Yes.
believe in you more.
Yes.
And, really, they were not married for that long a period of time.
No.
Because, he passed away in 1984. And I'm just curious, was there a real brouhaha at the time with her leaving her husband? I mean, how did he feel? He was part of this growth and this building of the company and the empire, and then she leaves him and marries the founder.
Yes, I think that he was devastated, but he also, at that point, I think this was moving along for a long time. I don't think it was a complete and total surprise. And in the book, I talk about an earlier attempt where they were going to run off and get married. So I don't think that Raleigh Smith was surprised. Of course, he was upset from everything I could tell, everybody I've talked to. But I think that it's interesting. This has been an interesting challenge for me because I basically am telling the story of the beginning of McDonald's in a way that hasn't been told before, just because McDonald's has always carefully constructed the origin story. And then I'm telling the story about Ray and Joan, both of whom left few papers, and both of whom just really didn't want people to talk about this. This was a shameful thing back then, to run off with somebody else.
Exactly.
Right?
Right.
Like today,
Yeah.
today it wouldn't be the greatest thing in the world, but for then to have an executive, and Ray, in between, Ray married another woman. He divorced his first wife of 40 years and married a second wife while he was waiting for Joan to agree to marry him. So imagine having a 3 times married executive of a major corporation that was making so much money for so many people at that time. It's just hard to imagine. So I think that, yes, Raleigh was disappointed. Raleigh had these restaurants. He did marry again. And apparently he and Joan, they had a daughter together. They had a good relationship as the years went on. After Ray died, he would often, Ray had in the 70s bought the San Diego Padres, and Raleigh and his second wife would often come to the game as guests of Joan. So they made it work. A lot of, again, these people had been married very young, as was often the case back then. People married right out of school. And I think that, unfortunately, people realize if you marry at 19 or 20, that by the time you're 40, maybe that's not the right person. So I think there are all these other societal complications as well as personal complications, and it seemed like they got along. Ironically, Raleigh died right after Joan did, and tragic for their daughter, of course, that they both passed away within such short time frame.
Well, it's also, I think, interesting, Lisa, that the social media wasn't then, and publicity wasn't then. I mean, even in Hollywood, the stars were really protected from publicity because of the studios, and they dated the people they were told to date, and you didn't hear about all these extra things and all
Right.
the drinking and the drugs and you just didn't hear about it. Whereas today, if something happens, you know about it in the next 30 seconds because somebody's filming it with their iPhone.
Exactly.
But, I mean, it makes a big difference. But you also said that, Joan was very different and very contradictory. She was very fascinating, and she was. You quote, you say, endlessly altruistic and unapologetically extravagant, elegant, and bawdy, and a devoted wife and a self-reliant feminist. So, I mean, she really was such a character in her own right.
Yes.
And I don't think anybody knew that, because even after he died, and she was so generous with all the donations that she gave, that we only, discussed a very few things of that, because she, she really, I was fascinated by the fact that you said she sent $15 million in relief funds for a flood, and she was called the Angel of Grand Forks, and she gave billions to homeless and hospice and substance abuse and universities and hospitals and theaters, and my gosh, on and on and on. So what do you think that she came into her own after Ray's death, or do you think that she was one of those great partners for him, even though it was late in his life, that she really contributed to all of this?
I think both. I really do. I think that she, like many women of the time, had it was a conflict. I mean, she wanted to be a good spouse, but she wanted to be her own woman. I think she recognized that she was in this incredible position as the wife of extraordinarily wealthy man. And I think, it's certainly that he was much older than she was. So I think that she knew that if, I think she loved that McDonald's had made this life for her first husband, and that it had made Ray's life the way it was. She was sort of a believer of the early McDonald's ethos. As time went on, though, she wasn't a big fan of the corporate structure. She came into her own as a woman. She became more confident, and she turned that confidence to her advantage. And I think, Gail, the reason I love this story so much, I'm 53 years old. My mother is 79, and I watched my mother, who is a little bit younger than what she would have been. Joan would be 85 right now. So, she's pretty much the same generation. And I watched my mother do that struggle. My mother really would have loved to have gone to college. She was from modest means and didn't. She worked always, always, always. And Joan was very much like that too. She worked while she was a young mother. She had 3 jobs. She was always making money. She was always involved and active in the community. And now all of a sudden she's plopped into this fairy tale, incredible situation with money, where it's not really a fairy tale, because it's complicated not just by Ray's drinking, but by the corporate politics and McDonald's inserting themselves into all of the decisions that Ray was making as far as his philanthropy. And she saw that, and she sort of plowed through it. And by the time Ray died in 1984, she was poised and ready. Although, who could ever be ready to have inherited hundreds of millions of dollars? But she was ready. She was positioned in this way that she stepped up so gracefully. And so, in such an interesting way, she didn't just write checks. And anybody else could have just written a bunch of checks and that would have been fine. But she was very active and engaged and inventive about how she used her money, put it to work. It's almost like she was waiting for a moment to occur. I hate to say that she was waiting for Ray to die. He had been ill for a long time at the end of his life. So like anybody who's cared for somebody who's been ill, I'm sure it was exhausting, emotionally consuming. And then once he passed, she plunged in. She really felt this, I've been told, this sense of responsibility to steward this fortune. What she did was, though, steward the fortune in the direction she would have wanted it to go, not necessarily the direction that Ray might have taken it had he lived. So that's what makes it such an interesting story.
Well, it certainly is. And I certainly, really encourage every one of our listeners to get this book, Ray and Joan, the man who made the McDonald's fortune and the woman who gave it all away. I mean, just fascinating. And going through a lot of the information here, and you say it in such a fantastic way. She donated a staggering $87 million in 1998 to build the Ray and Joan Kroc Salvation Army Community Center in San Diego, where I happen to be right now as we're doing this program. And it's a precursor to her groundbreaking posthumous gift of nearly $2 billion. I have to stutter when I say that. $2 billion to the national organization. I mean, just absolutely fantastic. I mean, just great. So is there anything else our listeners should know about this book and this story that we haven't said, because we only have like a minute left?
Well, I think what they should know is that it's exciting to see, McDonald's is a very polarizing company for lots of reasons, and most of them very good reasons. I'm not a fast food fan or supporter. I understand how it came to be. But what I love about this story is it shows you that out of something that is reviled in our society by many people, there are good things that can come out of it too. And of course, there are many people who are big supporters of McDonald's and fans and all of that. But I think that that's my biggest takeaway, is that not everything in life is black and white,
That's true. That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, this has just been a delight. I mean, I cannot even imagine what their life must have been like, and we can all live it vicariously through this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful book that you've written, Lisa.
Oh,
thanks so much for being with us. And everybody, I just can't encourage you enough to go out and get this book. Fascinating, and written by an absolutely fascinating woman herself. Thanks so much for being with us, Lisa. It has been a delight.
You're a dear. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. rayandjoan.com. You can find out more.